Welcome to the Foundation Series, your deep dive into startup compensation with industry leaders from across the startup world. Join me, Matt McFarlane, a people operations leader turned compensation specialist, as we uncover the strategies and practices driving success in tech startups around the world. Hear insights from heads of people, founders, and experts as we explore how to build robust compensation frameworks that not only fuel growth and retention, but do so in the dynamic startup environment that we all know and love. Let's get into it. In this episode, I'm joined once again by Melissa Theiss, head of people at Kit and founder of Fledge. Today, we dig deep into one of the thorniest challenges startups face as they grow, how to build a job structure that scales without killing agility. We talk about progression steps, title frameworks, when to introduce levels, and how to avoid the dreaded head of ambiguity. If you've ever wrestled with leveling frameworks or job architecture, this one is for you. All right, welcome to the Foundation Series. Melissa Theiss, I have been so excited to have this conversation with you. I think I've certainly been fangirling over your content on LinkedIn for a long time. I think you have such a really interesting commercial lens to a lot of the different things that you talk about under the sort of head of HR within a startup remit. So really excited to welcome you to the Foundation Series. I'd love it if you'd spend a quick minute introducing yourself for those who maybe aren't as familiar with you as I am, and then we can dive into our exciting episode.
Sure. So Melissa Theiss, I'm a 4-time head of business and people operations, currently the head of people operations at Kit, the email-first operating system for creators who mean business. I'm also the founder and principal of Fledge, an HR consulting firm that helps people leaders think like business leaders. So very appropriate for how you view my content on LinkedIn. Good to hear.
Absolutely. And amazing to have you here. All right, Melissa, I'm really keen to talk to you about something that comes up time and time again for me, which is how does a startup build a job structure that actually scales with the company? I mean, I've worked at companies, I know you have, where, every 12 months you're looking at a completely different configuration, a size, something's going on in terms of strategy. How would you say you'd strike a balance between being sort of detailed enough to give people a sense of their level of responsibility, but without becoming something that really prevents the agility or maybe reduces the kind of many hats that you need people to wear in startup?
Yeah. I think from a job leveling framework perspective, when organizations have fewer than 20 people, unless they're using salary tiers, I usually don't use levels at all. When companies are starting to introduce levels, I like to start inward and go outward. So what I mean by that is when you're looking at a standard leveling framework that might have like a P1 through a P6 for professional levels, I'll usually start with the P2 to the P4 or P5 levels only. That's where the vast majority of your talent is going to be concentrated. And especially when you're small, you're unlikely to be hiring really junior employees because you don't have the supervisors for them, or extremely highly skilled employees because you're unlikely to have the funds or the need for them. Yeah. And so I start with those middle levels. And then as an organization grows, I tend to add in what's called progression steps. So some people like the Microsoft style to just double all the levels. I don't like that. I don't like having 14 levels. But I do think that some people like to have the sense of progression and seeing movement within their career, especially as they move higher to P4, P5, P6, where you're going multiple years in between promotions, between levels. So I'll subdivide levels into early, midpoint, and late, so into thirds. And so when you're doing promotions or performance reviews, at a certain point, you can say, okay, you are now P4 early, or you've moved from P4 early to midpoint, which kind of gives people a general sense of they are still progressing and helps a manager to level set with an individual. If an individual typically spends, 3 or 4 years in this level and they're still early, they still have a ways to go before they're going to be asking or expecting a promotion, versus if they're late, they're probably approaching a promotion in the next or an upcoming cycle. And then in addition to the progression steps, I'll layer on and add the levels at the edges over time, like the P1 and the P6. Same thing for management framework. Like I won't add an E8, like an SVP at a startup until you have hundreds and hundreds of people. I just skip it. E7, E9. I'm like, you need your C's. but I'll just go like M3 through M5 and then skip M6 and have E7, E9. And you just like start in the middle, work outwards, skip the ones you don't need.
I really like that. So basically it's like kind of having the framework there, but almost being silent on these levels until you actually need them. Because yeah, you're right. Like I've worked with companies, and we'll probably talk about this in the next question I'm eager to ask, is like, you don't want people to look at something and not see themselves in it. And I think too often you can, again, we talk about, simplicity and things like that. Like you don't want to create this complexity where people look at it and go, well, this is too big for our company, or, there's 3 gaps or 3 levels between me and my boss or something like that. I've also worked somewhere where we did do the doubling of the levels, and that was another real challenge in the sense that every second level was a progression step. So more of a, like, I guess you could describe it as like the sort of expert for that level, and the entry point for that level was how the 2 levels work together. But again, some of the challenges we had there were people just looked at this enormous ladder and go, well, how am I ever going to get to the role that I want to be at? And so it really hampered conversations from a career progression perspective as well.
I like when job titles, this is more job architecture than job leveling, but I like when job titles have a one-to-one mapping with job levels when possible. And so progression steps, subdividing a level lets you to keep that for longer, a title mapping to a single level. So when your level changes, your title also changes. That just tends to be the way most normal humans think about it and expect it to work. So I like to design things that do actually work the way things expect them to work. Now, to your point about people wanting to see themselves and actually their next step as well in the framework, one of the ways that I address that, I do think progression steps help, because if you're an L5 and there's no L6, I get that anxiety of like, is there room for growth for me here? But the reality is, if you're an L5 early, you got years before you need that L6, right? But you might not know that or feel that or see that the organization is contemplating that. But if there are progression steps and the organization tells you as soon as you make it or anyone makes it to late in a current level for which the next level does not exist, we will make that next level within X period of time. Like that gives you the certainty that you need. So you can design the tools or frameworks that you'll deploy in the future without having to actually use them now. Another one I like to get ahead of that I see all the time, which is funny because this is actually my title as well, is the head of title.
Yeah.
Generally not a fan.
Classic generic title, isn't it?
Organizations do use it. It does generally map to like an M5 or an M6, more commonly director or senior director, but I've seen it used for VP or SVP as well. I had myself been promoted from like VP to head of, and I've had the reverse, been promoted, so it's used in a lot of ways. What I will say is like head of is what you use when you don't know what you want your leveling to be yet, and that is okay. But you need to decide when you're going to retire it or when you're going to replace it, or when you're going to clarify it. And so what I'll usually say is, head of has a certain designation until we hit X revenue, Y in funding round, or Z in headcount. And at that point, we will really reevaluate everyone in the head of title and move them into our then current job architecture. Because the reality is, at that point, you'll probably have some head ofs who are actually VPs and some who are actually senior managers. The range will likely be wide, and you need to address that at some point. But the headcount impacted is small, so don't. My company's 100 people. It's not worth making a big deal about it. It's not where we should spend our time right now.
Yeah, I agree completely. It is that like ephemeral sort of title that is always like, which way is it going to go? Like, what does it represent? I was asked this question the other day of like, what does the head of map to? And I was like, mate, it's different in every company. It's totally different. But that's also actually a really good segue into my next question, which is like, building the framework is one thing, making it fit is another. What are the most effective ways to deal with things like, I guess title inflation, but also expectation inflation as well, where maybe there is a head of who goes, well, I thought I was going to be a VP when we introduced these sorts of things. How do you tend to find is the best way to approach this? Because in all my experience, it's never been an easy journey introducing structure, like a job architecture to an organization. And this is one of the main reasons why. What are some of your tips to tackle?
Yeah, I think this again has to come back to a philosophy on where you stand between like individualism and equity. Because if you choose to introduce a framework and you want to immediately move everyone into their appropriate position in the framework based on an assessment against that framework. You're going to have some people who move up, and you're going to have some people who stay the same, and you're going to have some people who move down. Those people who move up, some will be delighted, but some will actually still be really frustrated because they'll feel like they got slighted for a long time and they won't get back pay and this, that, and the other. Managers expect it to be pure delight. That is rarely the case. Sometimes it is, and that's wonderful, but that is often not what you see. But what they do expect is when you move someone down, that is often really poorly received. But you can do like a one-time break the bone style exercise where you move everyone as quickly as possible over a single quarter or over 2 quarters. And then it's really painful. You're going to see your morale numbers probably take a dip. You're going to see your turnover numbers take a hit, but then your compensation is fixed. Everyone, as long as you stick with that architecture and hire in the future, it's cleaner. Your other alternative is, you have 2 others. You can set a sunset date where you say like, hey, this is the new framework. We're going to give people a certain set of time overall or a certain set of time based on your level, where if you are misleveled, we will give you the opportunity to reach this new performance level. If you're misleveled below your level, we're just going to promote you immediately or as soon as we have the budget. But if you're misleveled above your level, you have 3 months if you're an L1, 2 years if you're a P6 or something like that. You have to figure out how you want to handle that before you hit that time frame, and we'll reassess regularly. And then at the end of that time period, we will demote you if you have not hit that time period. I will say I have never actually seen someone get demoted at the end of that. 100% of the time, I've seen people improve or opt out before, but it still tends to be a pretty negative experience. The third option, which I would say is the most popular option, but each has their own set of pros and cons, is you just keep the status quo, and you try to have every new decision that you make move people closer to coherence with the framework over time. But it's hard when people can look around and continue to see examples where the framework isn't being met and they feel they're being held to a standard that others are not. So which of those 3 options you want to go with, like break the bone, do it all at once, do sunset dates, or let the status quo be the status quo and try to make coherent decisions that move you closer to the framework, where you want to land in that, I think you just need to pick and do it consistently organization-wide. There's no right or wrong. It's a philosophical decision. There are pros and cons to each, and your business strategy drives your talent strategy drives your compensation strategy. How much turnover can you handle from what departments? Like, those are the business conversations you need to have. And then you need to talk to your founder about how do they feel about people and treatment of people, how are your finances, and that's going to indicate which of those 3 you should do. I have done all 3. And
interesting.
I've not
heard of the sunset one before. So interesting. Yeah. And I would imagine, the last one would be challenging as well if you add into the mix that if you are high growth, like you're probably changing the levels all the time as well as trying to bring people slowly into alignment with them. So it's like, is that really an environment you want to be in, or do you want to take the more extreme sort of break the bones approach that you mentioned as well, or something in the middle? But those are some really great examples to consider. What about when you're actually at the stage of implementing it? And again, I think another challenge that tends to crop up is like, how do you level people objectively, especially if maybe you're a company that's introducing this kind of structure late to the game. You don't have the kind of, big people team that can really be expansive and across the whole approach. So you're probably leaning on your leaders a lot more. How do you find is the most effective way to level people effectively and consistently?
Yeah, I will say it's a real challenge. You do have to lean on your leaders and their ability to accurately assess their direct reports' work. You have to know the areas where you have leaders overseeing teams or functions in which they themselves are not subject matter experts, and understand whether or not you have the time and the resources to bring in someone else to evaluate their work. And if you can, I think that's great. It increases your accuracy. If you can't or you don't want to, that's okay. You just have to know that it's going to decrease your accuracy. I mean, I don't know about you, but I think in every team that I've come into, I've led teams of 1 to 40 people. I don't think I've come into a team yet as a manager where 100% of the people on my team have been leveled correctly.
Yeah.
and maybe
Just a
I'm not
startup
leveling
reality.
correctly. Like, I just disagree. I think I'm pretty good at leveling people. I tend to manage roles that I've done myself, right? And so I feel like I understand them really well. But when I don't know them well myself, if it's a role I'm managing directly or if it's a role I'm advising, I will tend to lean on internal calibrations of people, even if they're not managing that role currently with the organization, if it's a role they've managed previously. And if we can't do that, I will see if we can bring in external talent. Do we have a board member? Do we have someone else who's a friend of the company? Do we have someone else who we could come in? They would sign an NDA. They would give 2 hours. It's better than nothing to evaluate the work and just give a high level sign off like, hey, where do they think? Especially if we have the calibration group that really disagrees between 2 levels, and we use a tiered system and not a compensation band system, because that's where it's going to make a longer term difference to that individual and a longer term financial difference to the company.
Yeah, I really like the idea of sort of leaning on a trusted advisor there. I think especially because when you are a startup, you don't want this kind of like overly prescriptive system that makes people feel like they're in, the box and they can't sort of step outside of it. But some of the challenge that comes from that is when you aren't prescriptive, people tend to go, well, I did this thing once, so maybe I'm the level above where I am. And rather than it be something that it's like, well, are you consistently demonstrating that? Is it a core part of your role, or was it something that you stretched up into on this one occasion? Finding that sort of litmus test for consistency is really important. That was really insightful. Thank you so much for running us through that. I appreciate it.
I think I have only seen one company so far who has a written promotion standard. What you were talking about. How long does someone have to be performing at the next level to actually be promoted at the next level? It's like one of the most common things. It's literally 2 sentences. All you have to write is 2 sentences. It's just like so much clearer. Yeah.
Yeah, I think everywhere I've ever worked, I've always come up against someone, usually, not to generalize, but it's usually someone who's a lot younger, who's like, oh, I did this thing once, so therefore I'm a senior, whatever. And it's like, oh, no. Sorry.
Yeah, I listened to your podcast with Jessica Swan, and it's funny where she's talking about like reading her own work previously and like being like, oh, cringe. And I do that now. I reread one of my old performance reviews recently. I don't remember why. I was like cleaning out my house or something. I was like, I owe my manager an apology. I can't believe I wrote this. I was so sassy in a performance review. Like, what was happening?
All we can do is go, at least I'm growing as an individual and a professional, that I can look back at that and know that was trash.
Yeah.
It is hilarious, isn't it? That wraps up another practical and really thought-provoking chat with Melissa Theiss. We covered how to build just enough structure to support scale without slowing your company down, and unpack the trade-offs of different leveling rollout strategies. My biggest takeaway was that you need to be intentional. Whether you're doing a break-the-bone re-level, setting sunset dates, or nudging things along gradually, pick a path, align it with your business strategy, and stick to it. If this episode hit home for you, leave a review or share it with someone else navigating the messy middle of startup growth. I'll see you next time on the Foundation Series. Thanks for joining us on another edition of the Foundation Series. Make sure to head over to our website to subscribe to the Foundation Series for monthly editions featuring future interviews on startup compensation. In each edition, we'll explore the different strategies, trends, and challenges faced by startups around the world. If you have a burning topic you'd like me to cover or a standout guest that you want to hear from, drop me an email so I can dive deeper into the compensation topics that matter most to you. Join me next time as we continue to uncover the strategies and practices driving success in global tech startups around the world. Thanks for listening.